I'm Brandy from Empire BlueCross BlueShield. I wanted to host an event where we could just learn a little bit more about our trans lives, as this has been a very interesting past year, and things have gotten worse for a lot of our trans peoples. So I reached out to a good friend, Asia, at Staten Island Pride, and she was completely on board. And I want to thank her for just stepping up to the plate and saying yes without even knowing anything else, and for supporting this event. So we have some amazing speakers, just a few housekeeping tips. As you may see in the chat, you could only chat to the panelists. If you have a question, please feel free to post in there at any time. We will keep a close eye on the chat. We will be sure that your question is acknowledged either via chat or through the screen. So also, if you want more information on this event at the end, there will be a wrap up, as you may have come into the event, provided your email address. We will send a follow-up email just to let everybody know the resources that you may have. So please look out for that. We're also going to have a few polls coming through. We are going to drop a poll via Google to start with, just to get an idea of who's in the room and what they know. And again, thank you for being a part of this event. And we have a few people in the room that I want to introduce. First off, we have Staten Island Pride Center team. They are all lit up, it looks like. We have Golden Brooks, Arthur Charles, Haley Peterson, and Asia Harris. It says A.L. Harris on her screen there, looking amazing. And we also, we also have Cristobal Garcia and Wendy Dominguez. So these are going to be the folks that you will hear from, specifically Golden, Haley, and Cristobal. We have some great information. If we could just go to the agenda to get a quick overview of what this event is going to consist of. We will learn a little bit about the background of some important events and peoples that were a part of the history. We'll also have a mental health overview. And then of course, Empire will go over some support tips that you may want to know or things about us. So feel free to ask any questions again in the chat. We will keep a close eye. And if you do want to talk, just ask us and we will see how we can make that happen. Otherwise, everybody's on mute just so that we could all enjoy the presentation, but please don't feel like you can't speak or you can't engage. We want everybody to be able to have a conversation today. So I'm going to turn it over to Pride and we're going to begin.
All right. Hello, everyone. First off, I want to introduce myself. My name is Golden Brooks, and a little about myself. I have a master's in social work, and I'm Black and half white, but first and foremost, I am a proud Black woman, and I'm very excited to be doing this event. And my title at the Pride Center is the Trans and Gender Nonconforming Specialist and Counseling Program Coordinator. So I will be opening up this presentation with a historical context, going over lovely and fabulous trans history. And trans history is American history, it's Black history, it's all encompassing. And then following that, I will be leading the conversation from a clinical perspective on the Black trans community, and then Haley will finish it up. So let's get started. So Black and gender nonconforming people have undeniably been making Black history, and that does not start or end with Marsha P. Johnson at the Stonewall Inn. Stonewall is incredibly famous, and we'll get into that. It includes histories we're only just uncovering, stories we have been given more opportunities to share, and the work of thousands of people every day in this world. Like all Black history, TGNC Black history is happening and needs to be celebrated daily. So here, we're going to talk about some of the people in this image. And pictured on the left is the lovely Lucy Hicks Anderson. She was born in 1886 in Kentucky. And from a young age, she wanted to present as female. and wanted to be called Lucy instead of her birth name, Tobias. On top of that, she managed to marry 2 men in her lifetime, fighting for her marriages to be accepted as legal and for her to be accepted as a woman, which she absolutely was. And this made her an early fighter for both marriage equality and trans acceptance. However, she was accused of lying under oath during her marriages by not disclosing that she was assigned male at birth. Her response, while not accepted, was powerful. She said, "I defy any doctor in the world to prove that I am not a woman. I have lived, dressed, and acted just what I am, a woman." And then following Miss Lucy, we have Sir Lady Java. Sir Lady Java was cross-dressing and was banned. And Sir Lady Java was born in New Orleans and then moved to LA, which she protested LA's notorious Rule Number 9, which made cross-dressing illegal. These well-attended protests predate Stonewall by several years. Keep in mind, Stonewall was in 1969. Java, who worked as both a waitress and female impersonator at the Red Fox Club, and who claimed to have dated Sammy Davis Jr., was profiled in Jet magazine for her curvaceous beauty and her persistent picketing. Bowing to pressure from the LAPD, which wanted Java's so-called cross-dressing club act stopped, the Red Fox Club canceled her act. So she joined the ACLU to argue that the law was unconstitutional and took away her income. Even though her legal change ultimately failed, Java's story received national attention, particularly from Black and queer publications, which likely played a favor in laws eventually disappearing. And then in the 1966 issue of Jet magazine, with only some periodical evidence of the story of Avon Wilson. Avon Wilson was the first person to undergo sexual reassignment surgery, also known as SRS, at the now closed Johns Hopkins Gender Center. And then we have Gladys Bentley, born in Philadelphia in 1907. Gladys Bentley was taunted as a child for being an overweight tomboy, but in the few years she had the last laugh. In her trademark white tuxedo and top hat, the 300-pound gravelly voice singer and piano player flaunted her reputation as a bull dagger or butch lesbian. A top entertainer during the Harlem Renaissance, she headlined the Cotton Club and the Clam House, where she openly flirted with women in the audience. In 1928, Bentley began a 20-year recording career, which sadly does not include any of her bawdy lyrics or lesbian references. Her marriage ceremony to a white woman in New Jersey was widely publicized, expanding the reach of notoriety, but it was also quietly set up her life for that would soon grow harsh. In 1937, she moved to LA, where she was harassed for wearing men's clothing, though she managed to eke out living and working mainly in gay clubs for the next decade. The repressive climate in the 50s made it especially tough to be out as a butch lesbian. Needing to salvage her career, in 1952, Bentley published an essay in Ebony saying that she had been cured of her lesbianism and was now married to a man, though the effectiveness of her treatment and the validity of the marriage could never be verified. A sad coda to what have been a life lived without compromise. And then here, the backdrop image, we have Dewey's. And this is an event that happened in 1965. It was a lunch counter sit-in. In 1965, the protesters at Dewey's restaurant lunch counter in Center City, Philadelphia, demanded access to public accommodations for LGBTQ people. It was the first known protest of its kind in Philadelphia and one of the earliest demonstrations in the United States. This took place in 17th Street Dewey's. In response to a disruptive crowd of gender-varying teenagers, Dewey's management instructed staff to refuse them service. The teenagers joined forces with the Janus Society, a local gay and lesbian rights organization, to protest this policy. On April 25th, 1965, 150 people were refused service at the 17th Street Dewey's. 3 teenagers and Clark Pollock who was the president of the Janus Society, were arrested and found guilty of disorderly conduct. So Stonewall is huge, absolutely, absolutely huge, and one of the cornerstones of the LGBTQ liberation movement. And many New Yorkers would argue that it started with Stonewall. But by all accounts, the leaders of this monumentally important event were Black, trans, and gender expansive folks. So on the left here, we have Stormy Delivery. Delivery was at Stonewall on the night of the police raid. She was also a victim of police brutality, and they repeatedly beat her in the head with a baton. When she was being beaten, she fought back and she shouted at bystanders, "Why don't you guys do something?" That was the moment that it motivated the crowd to gather to action, and the riots began. At the time, the identity of the woman was unclear until she was interviewed in 2008, saying it was her, though she said it was no one's business, so she had not talked about it before. After Stonewall, she continued to perform, and she worked as a professional bodyguard. She was also known for roaming the streets of the West Village in New York, a very much LGBTQ haven here, at night to keep people safe and from harassment and attacks. Often her narrative is erased when we're talking about Stonewall. And as the conversation has been picked up more over the years, her narrative is being put in there. Famously, we have Marsha P. Johnson, and she's argued to be one of the first people to fight back against the police during the Stonewall Rebellion. According to her friends, she initiated, the rebellion when she threw a shot glass at a police officer who hassled her for an ID. Many New York activists give Johnson's actions credit for sparking the rebellion that is remembered as the beginning of the modern LGBT rights movement. She also founded this incredible organization called STAR, and STAR stands for Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. STAR centered the needs to trans women of color and worked closely with anti-racist organizations, including Black Panthers and the Young Lords. I also want to make note that the word transgender was not used very often and colloquially back then. So transvestite was an all-encompassing word for the transgender community. It's now considered quite derogatory, so please refrain from using the word transvestite when addressing or speaking about transgender people. And then we have Miss Major, who was also present during Stonewall, but this isn't like the first time she had a terrible, terrible brush. So she was locked away in a men's prison, and Griffin Gracie was also present during the Attica prison uprising, which is very, very famous. She is still alive, thankfully, and today she still works for the liberation of trans women through her organization, Transgender Variant Intersex Justice Project. I believe Miss Major is now on the West Coast. So it doesn't stop at Stonewall. We have to keep it moving, and it continued very much onto the modern era. So we have the beautiful Tracy Norman in 1975, who appeared on Clarel's Born Beautiful hair color number 512. She was trans, but she kept it a secret. And while on a photo shoot with Essence, they found out about her assigned gender at birth, and the assistant to the hairdresser told the editor, Susan Taylor, who was on the set. There was outrage. They felt deceived. So she was no longer socially acceptable to work in the industry, and she ended up taking a job at Show Center, where she performed in a burlesque peep show for trans women, often especially Black trans women, have to work as sex workers because they're not afforded equal opportunities at jobs. In recent years, a piece of New York Magazine highlighted her story, has brought Tracy back to prominence and resurrected her career. With Claro bringing her back for a Nice and Easy campaign, and in 2016, Tracy Norman and Gina Rosero became the first two openly trans models to appear on the cover of an edition of Harper's Bazaar, which is huge. And then we have Rita Hester. She was a Black trans woman that was murdered, and her death created an outpouring of support and grief and anger. And because of her death, it inspired the Remembering Our Dead web project and the Transgender Day of Remembrance. Trans Day of Remembrance was founded in 1999 by Gwendolyn A. Smith, a trans woman, to memorialize the murder of trans women all over. And now it's an international day of action. And then, of course, famously, we have Lebron Cox, who played Miss Sophia in Orange is the New Black. She became the first openly trans person to be nominated for a Primetime Emmy in any acting category. And she was also the first openly trans person to appear on the cover of Time magazine. I mean, she has tons of firsts, tons. She's doing it all, I promise you. And she's also the first openly trans person to have a wax figure of herself in the Wax Museum. And she is an incredible activist, and she has many documentaries on her work highlighting trans people. And then we have Andrea Jenkins. She's an American policy aide, a politician, writer, performance artist, poet, activist, you name it, it's Andrea. She is known for being the first openly Black trans woman elected to public office in the US, and she's been serving since January 2018 on the Minneapolis City Council. She was elected vice president of the City Council shortly after her election. She also serves as a chair of the new Race Equity Subcommittee and helped create a racial equity community advisory committee consisting of city residents. So we love, you know, working with local politicians and stuff like that to really get stuff on the ground level done. And pictured here are participants of the Black Trans Lives Marches that have been taking place through 2020 and have led to a new wave of intersectional activism that has taken place online and in the streets. It's beautiful. So now we're moving into the clinical portion of the presentation. This was a collaborative.
Golden, sorry. So we do have some questions.
Oh, sure.
But it doesn't pertain to this, the information that you just gave. So I just want to let everybody know, we'll try to ask the questions at the right time and possibly save them till the end so that we could all get through all the presentations. So just note, if you have a question, we plan to address it at the right time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are moving into the clinical portion of the presentation, and this is a collaborative effort done with my amazing colleagues and the TGNC counseling team. So we have me, Golden, who is doing the first half. My manager, Tommy, could not be here. He uses he, him pronouns, and he's the counseling service program manager. And then we have Haley Peterson, who's an MSW candidate. We share the same position, and Haley uses they, them, theirs pronouns. So we're going to be speaking on Black-centered TGNC, cultural competency, and mental health. Now, you've heard me throw around TGNC a couple of times, and so you're probably guessing and asking, what does TGNC mean? What is this other acronym that I have to memorize? So we're going to get into that. So TGNC stands for trans and gender nonconforming, spells it out. And so when working with trans clients in any clinical setting, whether it be therapeutic or medical. There are language and terminology that, should be known to give them the best service possible. And just for anyone, really, even on the insurance side of things, just to be aware of these words and terminology, because language is important and that ultimately affects service. So let's get into some definitions. So we have cisgender, and that's a person whose gender identity aligns with the sex they were assigned at birth. For example, I am a cisgender woman. I identify with the sex that I was assigned at birth. Gender dysphoria is a clinically significant distress caused when a person's assigned sex at birth does not match their gender identity. What is gender identity? And gender identity is one's innermost concept of self as male, female, blend of both, neither, or other. It's whatever. This is how an individual perceives themselves and what they call themselves. So their gender identity is more psychological. Gender nonconforming and gender expansive. We like to use gender expansive because nonconforming seems a bit negative or harsh. There's nothing wrong with identifying as nonconforming, but expansive is largely more inclusive. So it's a broad term that refers to people whose gender expression does not conform to traditional expectations of gender. Queer, very hotly contested word, refers to a spectrum of identities and orientations outside of cisgender and heterosexual. Please note that many people in the boomer generation and even some people who are Gen X may not take kindly to be called queer and don't identify as queer, whereas millennials and Gen Z are much more open to identify as queer. For some, queer is still very, very derogatory, and many people like to reclaim the word for their identity. Non-binary. Now, this refers to a person who does not identify exclusively as man or woman. A non-binary person may identify as being both a man and a woman, somewhere in between, or falling completely outside of these categories. And trans refers to people whose gender identity or expression is different from the sex that they were assigned at birth. Okay, I explained TGNC and BIPOC. BIPOC is very, very popular to use now. I love it. And BIPOC is Black, Indigenous people of color. So we're going to get into some statistics to highlight the disparities and disproportionality that happens within the Black trans community. I know clinical language is very daunting. So again, disparity is an outcome, and disproportionality is when there is a demographic or a statistic that is double the population. I can give you an example. Black people make up around 12% of the US population. However, they make up nearly a third of the foster care population. So that's an example of disproportionality. It has to be at least doubled. So the 2015 US Trans survey was the largest survey of experiences of trans people. Nearly 28,000 people responded, and nearly 800 of them identified as Black and trans. So here are some key findings about Black trans people in the US. One of the biggest issues, or perhaps the biggest issue, is racism. You can find that nearly for every single bullet point, why is this happening, is because of racism. And also what we know as trans misogyny. Trans misogyny is a hatred and abuse towards trans women. And then you get further into that with transmisogynoir. Transmisogynoir as the noir at the end for Black, meaning it is very specific towards Black trans women. So here are some things that should absolutely be highlighted. So 42% of Black respondents have experienced homelessness at some point of their lives, compared to 30%. And 38% of Black trans respondents were living in poverty, compared to 24% of Black people in the US population. And 20% of Black respondents were unemployed, which is twice the rate among Black people in the US, which is about 10%. And 67% of Black respondents said they would feel somewhat or very uncomfortable asking the police for help. So now we're going to get into the health aspects. So insurance, that's why we're all here, right? So 1 in 5 or 20% of Black respondents did not have health insurance, compared to the 14% of the respondents in the study overall. So that includes white respondents, so nearly 20%. This was nearly twice as high as the rate in the US population, which is 11%. And again, even higher, a higher rate among Black people in the US population, which is 13%. So health experiences with providers. More than 1/3 of respondents who saw a healthcare provider in the past year reported having at least one negative experience related to being trans. This included being refused treatment, verbally harassed, being physically or sexually abused, or having to teach the provider about trans people in order to get appropriate care. You know, when you go to a provider, you're hoping that, you know, you don't have to be a teacher. You're the one seeking help. One thing that should be absolutely noted about providers, and especially about trans men, is that those that have legally changed their name and gender marker, when they go to the OBGYN or have any gynecological appointments and they check off that they're male, insurance providers may deny them coverage or service for the OBGYN, which is detrimental to their physical health, and it is unethical to deny them services or coverage because of their gender marker. And with that, I'm gonna have Haley wrap up the clinical portion and just speak more on what you can do with the language given today.
Thanks, Golden. So like Golden mentioned, my name is Haley. I am one of the TGNC specialists and the counseling program coordinators at the Pride Center, and I use they, them pronouns. So Golden gave us such a great introduction. And so I think now we're kind of getting into that portion. What does this mean for us, or how do we take this information and move forward? And as clinicians and as service providers, one of the most important things we can do for TGNC people is make them feel validated and seen and respected. And one of the easiest and most effective ways to do that is to use their pronouns, and to make using pronouns easy and accessible and normalized. So with that, when you join a Zoom meeting, because we're all in Zoom land now, throw your pronouns in your display name. If you'll notice, all of us at the Pride Center have done that. It's a really easy way to show TGNC people that are around you that you're comfortable or you're an ally. With that, when you're meeting a client or a service user for the first time, introduce yourself with your name and your pronouns. Let them know that you're comfortable talking about pronouns in the first sentence you share with them. And something that is really important and is a big shift lately, or a big movement lately in the TGNC community, is to stop using the phrase preferred pronouns. When you ask for someone's preferred pronouns, you're suggesting with the word preferred that pronouns are suggested, or that you can use any other one. And that's just not the case. Pronouns are mandatory. I will note, and it's an important note to make, that there is one exception to this. And if you have a client or a service user or a patient who uses 2 different pronouns, so sometimes that can look like she, they, or he, they, sometimes even she, he. In that case, you can ask which one of those pronouns they would prefer to be addressed by, all the while knowing that whatever they tell you is still a mandatory pronoun usage. And then we can go to the next slide, Arthur. Thank you. And so another thing to keep in mind is that as clinicians and as service providers, we occupy a really strange role with our TGNC clients. Our healthcare system is transphobic, and there's just no way about that. And because of that, we are asked to be these gatekeepers of gender affirming services. So when a TGNC person needs to access gender affirming surgery or gender affirming medicine in general, hormones, most providers require a letter from a mental health professional and a letter from a physician to verify that this person is trans enough, or that their transness is real enough to receive these life-saving and gender-affirming medicines. This is kind of just a fact of our system as it is. Some providers are moving away from it, but not all are. So it's really our job to acknowledge that this is a failure of the system and work to move past it, work to make the system a little bit better for our TGNC folk. And so another really important thing to note, and that I can't emphasize enough, that there's just no one way to be trans. Every cisgender person is unique, every trans person is unique. And so with this, it's important to remember that some TGNC individuals will want hormones and some will not. Some TGNC individuals will want to change their names, others won't. Some will want to use a different pronoun, others won't. Some experience gender dysphoria, some don't. There are surgeries available to there's a ton of different surgeries available to TGNC folks, but you don't need to have surgery to be trans, and you don't need to want it to be trans. So again, to beat a dead horse here, there is no one way to be trans, no right way to be trans. And then I think, just to kind of wrap up, it's really important to acknowledge, as Golden had mentioned, that we grow up in a very prejudiced society. We grow up in the same society that is conditioned to think of gender as a binary, as male or female. I mean, I know you've all seen those gender reveal parties where blowing balloons, we're shooting off darts to celebrate what amounts to a baby's genitals. So we really grow up with this society of this binary. And because of that, even if we're trying, we still have this unconscious and implicit bias that affects how we interact with the world and how we interact with the people and TGNC folk in it. And so what can we do about this, right? Like, we acknowledge it, it's here, and then how do we move past it? How do we get better at it? And I think there's a couple of ways or questions we can ask ourselves to kind of check ourselves, keep us in check, if you will. And so some questions that I like to use personally are, how do my current beliefs serve me? What would happen if I change my beliefs? Is there something I would lose by changing those beliefs? What are the costs of maintaining my current perspective? Is someone hurt because I think this way? And then how might it benefit me to change those beliefs? Or how might it benefit my clients or participants or patients to change those beliefs? And then I think I'm going to be passing this off to Cristobal from Empire. So thank you all for listening.
Awesome, thank you so much for that. And I loved how you ended everything with those questions. I mean, it's so important. I mean, I don't identify as trans, but I definitely, as somebody that is part of the LGBTQ community, I try to really put myself in others' shoes when I'm, whether it's something I'm hearing or if I'm sharing something, just because, you know, one of the things that's coming out as a gay man is, you know, I try to always kind of think about how the other person would feel when I was going through my coming out process, because I think it's really important to always kind of do that to gain perspective. But yeah, so my name is Cristobal Garcia. I'm really happy to be able to come on this great panel to talk today. I'm just gonna pull up my little slides over here in my notes. So I am at Anthem, or at Empire, which is a company of Anthem. I work as a project manager. I work within our Medicaid division at Empire. So I work with you know, those that receive Medicaid. I work supporting the clinical team in different initiatives. So right now I oversee one of our HIV programs, but I started out as a health educator, really working in the community and providing health education kind of face to face. I'm also really involved with our Pride Associate Resource Group. And, you know, that group, I'll talk a little bit about what it is that we do, but I'm really honored to be able to now serve as a regional lead within that group and really help not only within New York, but outside of New York. We're a huge company, but in New York, our presence has been around for over 85 years. So it's really great to be able to participate in community events to really, whether it's just getting to know the community we serve, or to be able to share with the community about some of the, the things that we do. Because we are very involved in the community. I mean, like I said, I work with the clinical team, but Brandy is on today and she represents the community relations team. So we do service all of the 5 boroughs. So we do have community service centers throughout all of New York City. We're partnering today with the Pride Center at Staten Island, but we also, I'm very proud to say that we do partner with other LGBTQ serving organizations, such as the Trevor Project, SAGE, GMHC, Callan Lord, and of course, the Pride Center of Staten Island. And like I said, I am part of our associate resource group. So PRIDE, which stands for Promoting Respect, Individuality, Diversity, and Equality, is a group, it's a resource for the LGBTQ associates and allies. So I'm really honored to know that we have, not only do we have this group at Empire, but it's a very active group. So it's definitely something that I'm very proud of. So then I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. So I know, the healthcare system was kind of touched a little earlier today. And, the healthcare system, whether we're a provider, we're an insurance company, a hospital, it's very complex. I went to school, I didn't mention this, but I have a background in public health. So I had this passion to work in the community. And, then I got into this managed care business, not really knowing what managed care was when I started out my career. But, I'm proud to be working in managed care and being able to serve the Medicaid population, which is an underserved population, and, really be able to bring a different perspective to the table. It's not just about looking at, clinical reviews, or it's not just about where we can save money, but, it's also about what can we do to improve the communities that we serve. Because we know that one of the main challenges within the healthcare system is the lack of services in certain areas, access to care, right? I know that, we are speaking, we have partnering with a Staten Island organization, and we know that out of all of the boroughs in New York City, Staten Island tends to, maybe not get all the resources. So access to care is a huge thing. Socioeconomic factors, or what now people are calling social determinants to health, are a big thing. So, do people have access to food? Do they have access to housing? Do they have employment? If they have employment, what is the working conditions? And even gender, all of this can play a role in the healthcare access that we are able to obtain. Also, the LGBTQ, specifically the trans non-conforming population that we're talking about today, face discrimination and stigma within the healthcare system. Providers aren't educated to really, whether it's approach patients appropriately or understand the needs of the patients. I mean, that's very important. So I know us as an organization, we're definitely looking at ways, how can we improve that? How can we educate our providers? There's delaying care because of mistreatment. People may not be going to their doctor because of the way the doctor has treated them. Within the healthcare system, if you don't choose a primary care provider, usually a primary care provider is chosen for you because you need a primary care provider to access all levels of care. So it's important to reach out to your health insurance to really get the appropriate primary care provider that you choose. And as I mentioned, the lack of knowledge, this burden is on kind of all parts of the healthcare system. It even starts within medical schools. Are medical students getting the education they need to serve the communities that they're going to serve once they're practicing? Okay, so the next thing I wanted to just kind of touch on, so I said, I'm very proud of some of the things that we're doing at Empire, whether it's things that we're doing internally with our associates or externally with the services that we provide. So we do have Pride, which is the associate resource group that really partners with associates, and we find opportunities where associates can also get involved in the community. We also have a Safe Space program. Safe Space is an alliance program that allows LGBTQ identifying associates know that they are amongst their allies. So associates could sign up to be a Safe Space member. And when we were back in the office, you would have a magnet on your kind of cubicle. So if somebody were to walk by, they would know that you're a Safe Space member. And there are stories that I've heard throughout the years about, how seeing this magnet or a poster in somebody's office has welcomed somebody to come in and talk about maybe something they're going through, or even something that maybe a family member is going through and they don't really know who to turn to. And we also have a healthcare committee that is really looking for ways on how we can, as an organization, do better within the community. And then just to highlight, we have services, just like any insurance company, we cover preventative services, specialty care services, behavioral health services. But I do want to highlight that at Empire, we have a case management team. We have case managers that specialize in physical health needs. We also have case managers that specialize in social health or behavioral health needs. And we also have an HIV program. So we cover the services when in the community, whether it's that you want to treat HIV or even prevent HIV. We do cover those benefits. But as I said earlier, I oversee our internal HIV program. So we're really looking to make sure that if we identify members that have HIV, that we're making sure that they're connected to services, that they're connected to organizations like the Pride Center, and that they're going to their doctor regularly, or reaching out to them to see if maybe they need additional support, whether it's in their community or maybe support that we can provide them with our case management and supportive needs. And then I also wanted to highlight some of the providers that we partner with. Now, these are all providers that I know the Pride Center at Staten Island partners with. We have Mount Sinai, which is a system that has clinics all over the city. New York City Health and Hospital is also within network. City MD also within network. Callan Lord, an organization that I know does so much wonderful work within the community, also within within our network. And we not only partner with some of these organizations to provide medical services, but we often do partner with them when we're doing community services as well. And then I wanted to highlight, as I said, we do have community service centers throughout the city. It's a storefront that you can go to find out if you're eligible for our health plan, learn about what's covered. You can fill out an enrollment application at these sites and get any questions you have answered. But obviously right now, due to COVID, it's important to reach out beforehand, because a lot of our sites, the ones that are opened, only accept individuals by appointment. So I think we will be sharing this information in the handout, but I did want to highlight that the marketing manager is the point of contact for the Staten Island site, and that's Sonia Santiago. So you'll be getting that information in the packet. Also wanted to highlight that if you are a member of Empire already, it's always important to reach out to member services if you have questions. A lot of times it may be, it's not that the medication you're receiving isn't covered. Maybe there's a prior authorization that's needed. So calling member services can really help with looking into any issues you might have. Also, calling member services is a great way to get connected to our case management program if that's something that you feel you might be interested in getting more information about. Also, there's our website and the information for the marketing manager, which is a point of contact for the Staten Island Community Service Center. And then here is my email, which is the best way to reach me right now because I am working remotely. Also Brandy's email. So definitely reach out to me if you want to learn maybe a little bit more about some of the programs we offer to members, or are, anything related to the programs that I oversee. Obviously, I'll be able to answer more of your questions if you are already an Empire plan. But if you want to learn more about becoming an Empire member, you should contact Sonia at the Staten Island Community Service Center. And then Brandy is from our Community Relations Program, so that's her contact as well. So I really want to, first of all, just thank the Pride Center to really partnering with us. It's so great to, again, be able to partner with organizations in the community that not only provide maybe medical services, but also provide wonderful supportive services that are so important and impact health outcomes. And I also wanted to thank you all for, for coming and joining and hearing, what we have to share. So I know there might have been some questions. So I don't know, I'm going to turn it over to Brandy so she can kind of direct the Q&A section of the presentation.
Thank you so much for that. I hope you guys learned a lot. I know I have while trying to prepare for this event. So again, if you have any questions, just drop them in the Q&A and we will do our best to try to answer them. But I do want to address a question. And of course, anyone please speak up of the team here and try to answer. When you go to a PCP visit, what's the expectation for for a trans person that may go to one? Can any of you expound what you have experienced either at your site or in the past? And I know Haley tried to address this. If you just want to rehash what you shared, that would be great.
I can speak on.
Oh, thank you, Golden.
I can speak on the experiences on some of my clients. So going to their PCP, often being trans is left out on forms. This is super important and it's incredibly invalidating to not have that there. And often doctors don't find out until a trans person has to say it when they're in the room on the table. Yeah. So it's very important to include, perhaps a trans identity marker and pronouns on medical information. I mean, this should be on insurance forms. This should be on basic intake forms. It's on our intake forms. So it should be on all intake forms in all, like I said, in all clinical settings, whether it be therapeutic or medical or on the insurance side of things. One in the room, in the PCP, it's just that a lot of practitioners are not culturally competent and they don't have the language or just don't understand the language or just refuse to use the language to properly, talk to trans patients. And luckily we have our education outreach team that goes out to these places to educate on cultural competency for trans folks in a medical setting. It says, Deborah Mitchell, can you repeat, please? I didn't hear you clearly.
Yeah, if you want to turn up your sound a little bit, I don't know if that's going to help her speak closer. That's great. I will say.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Just to basically sum up what I said, and I'm speaking more into the mic, so hopefully that's better for you. For PCPs, there needs to be an identity marker for trans folks and options for pronouns and awareness and cultural competence when they're in the room when working with trans folks.
Great, and I think that's like that. For a doctor, it must be frustrating too, to try to perform some sort of examination and it's like oh, I didn't know, you know what I mean, instead of having it right there. You did say that you guys do go out and try to educate. Is this something that we can request from your team? How does this work if I do have an organization and I want them to be more aware of how to address people or help them better? What does that look like at the Pride Center? Do you guys offer this, and how do you offer it, in what ways at this time?
Well, sorry.
As an education outreach manager, we are focused as a team to work with the organizations that reach out to us to be provided the cultural awareness that we do. We make sure that it is to the audience that we're speaking to. Talking to medical professionals is going to come differently than talking to a school community, because all these things come together. There's a lot of intersectionality to it, that overall, how to better communicate with each other, how to make sure that we're being seen, or that we're making it possible for people to know that they should be seen, that there's visibility and access for all of us. So yes, it's particularly for the LGBTQ community and the TGNC community, but it's for all of us, because we always raise up the point, no one should be assuming on your person. When you go, especially for a medical appointment, all the information should be laid out to your medical provider. They should not be guessing, because they're informing what they're saying to you based on what they know about you. And things move fast, things move quick, but beyond like, okay, what am I looking on this piece of paper? This is the one time that you need to be selfish, and you should make sure that they know everything about you that's possible and as clearly as possible. And that would include not only your name, but also making sure your pronoun that you use. It's also important to know that if you identify what your sexual orientation is, these are things that are keys to knowing how to best diagnose, look into, guide you in your medical treatment and care. So we speak to our audiences specific to their need, and craft our trainings in that way and our workshops in that way. So the best way for anyone to get that training is to reach out to the Pride Center. You reach out to me, or in general, they'll get you to me, and author and I would work on something from there.
Thank you for that. That's good to know. I hope we answered both of your questions.
If I could add briefly to Deborah's question, I just also saw that they had written in the chat about what else they can do to better serve patients. And I think along with making sure our intake forms are gender neutral, instead of saying, do you have a husband or a wife, you can say partner. That's a big one that's really easy to do. Along with this section for legal name, there should also be a slot to put in preferred name, because a lot of TGNC people don't use or haven't been able to change their legal name yet. And then if you do add in that slot for preferred name, make sure it's on every chart, and make sure every single person in your office is using a preferred name, because nothing feels worse than telling someone your pronouns are your name, knowing they know what it is and having them not use it.
Something like this, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just want to be sure, does something like this create some sort of confusion, especially on documents that don't have this space? Like, say you go and get life insurance, I'm just throwing this out there, and you put your legal name, there's nowhere to put a preferred name. And how are we going to support them actually getting help that they need or things that they need in life when their name cannot be properly addressed? Like, well, okay,
wonderful question.
It's a wonderful question, but I also think it's a lot of questions. So I'm going to chime in a little here. So I'm Arthur Charlton, the community educator. I'm the person that usually goes around and does the workshops that we've been promoting. In the instance of what you're talking about, it's sort of twofold. Most trans and gender nonconforming folks are aware of their legal name and what the legalities of their situation are. So we want to create space as the life insurance salesperson or agent, or the medical insurance person, that you're acknowledging a person's name that they want to be called in your interactions with them. But of course, any person seeking out things understands that documents that are legal in nature have to have legal names. But again, it's twofold. When they're intaking with you, you want to say, what name am I calling you during our conversations, during our interactions?
Clear.
But of course, that person is mindful of the fact that wherever they are in their journey, they have to go with what is legally bound to them until such time they're able to make those accommodations. And you might be someone who's able to help them find that next step. We are able to connect people to legal resources to change their name if that's something they desire to do.
That was my follow-up question, but you answered.
Right.
Okay. And it's also to note that it's about the awareness of these things. Even if the forum doesn't have the space for it, now that whomever's in this meeting right now is able to hear and be aware that somebody might have a name that is a legal name versus their preferred name. So when you're asking or addressing someone about something under the legal name component of it, you would say so. You would say, and per your legal name, I need your legal name for X, Y, and Z, Z, Y, and X, but you call them by their preferred name. You let them know, right now, I don't have space on my form to put your preferred name, so I'm going to have to send your mail as under your legal name. Giving that understanding and making it clear that you're aware of that helps tremendously for people who are engaging and navigating through these channels. And again, not assuming on that person. Again, because you don't know, you don't ask, you don't make that awareness or make that space.
And just as an addendum to some of the spaces we've worked with, like Northwell Hospital, they've taken to starting to include the preferred name, like parenthetically and bolded on a ID band. They've created gender non-specific options on their X-ray tech machines. So I mean, the technology is lending itself to creating these avenues. It just takes work and time.
That's good to know. Haley, did you get to finish your? Sorry about that.
That's okay. I would like to also add something very small that I think makes a big difference. And Golden had mentioned earlier that there's one of the biggest barriers to TGNC people seeking medical care is that they think that they've had the experience of, or they're assuming that their provider won't know or won't be an ally. A small thing you can do is throw up a pride flag somewhere in the office, put it on the windows, put it on your website, put a TGNC flag up. The trans pride flag looks different than the rainbow flag. Put both of them up. It's a really small way to say to TGNC folks, LGBTQ folks, that you're safe here, you're welcome here. Very small, but it makes a big difference, I think.
Visibility.
I want to go to the next question. This one is about how to access some of the resources or help they may need, like case management. In y'all's experience, how have you seen that? Is the process long? Is it tedious? Do health insurances often offer them that you've experienced in the past? Can anybody expound on that? Specifically the case management.
I can speak on that. In terms, case management looks differently for every organization. With us, it is quite fast because we are small. We are on Staten Island. We have a smaller population. So obviously our case management, it looks 40 times different than what it may look like on Empire's end. For my clients, many of them do have Empire, and they've had great experiences with case management. I had a 16-year-old trans male that was able to get top surgery in Florida thanks to Empire BlueCross BlueShield, and he lives in New York. And he was able to be covered down there.
That's a great question. Can I pause you there? Are there any age caps, or do you have to have a parent to sign off if you're under the age of 18? Yes, we feel that this is what he wants to do. We're going to support. What does that look like that you've experienced, or the clients that you've had? Because it's a very young age.
Sure. Yes. It depends on the state.
Got you. Good to know.
I'd like to add too that it also depends on the provider. So I know Golden had mentioned, I think earlier, that some providers require letters, or maybe I mentioned it, require letters to verify kind of your gender experience, and some don't. And so some places, even if they don't require those letters for people over the age of 18, will require it for minors. So it's hard to answer that because it's different for every provider and it's different in every state.
Yeah. To know. Thank you for that. Cristobal, do you have anything to add in regards to case management at Empire? What that may look like if you've experienced it? Are there any limitations? Are there any hurdles, or how is that?
Well, definitely, I would say all of the above. So just before I get into case management, I did want to say, obviously, we're bringing the Empire perspective, but I also do want to highlight, I work within the Medicaid, space. So when you're talking about commercial versus Medicaid managed care, there's also going to be differences there, right? New York State is also really unique in that we have a much larger Medicaid program compared to some states in the country. So, these are all things you have to be very mindful of. But yeah, if the state wants to cover a benefit, all managed care, organizations need to cover it. There might be just some minor little differences, but like I said, I work within the Medicaid space. So with our case management program, we have different levels of case management. So obviously, we have, I believe, over 400,000 members. So we have a really large membership. So when it comes to any program, whether it's for-profit, non-for-profit, you want to, put your resources where you're going to make the biggest impact. So, we tend to definitely look for, supporting our sickest members to ensure that they're really getting the services that they need. But then, there's different programs. Like I said, there's an HIV program where we're looking at our members that are maybe not connected to services. We have other programs where it's maybe less intense, just to maybe help support our members on a less frequent basis. So that might be more long-term, but less frequent versus a program that might be more short-term, but maybe more intense. And then, we definitely within our HIV program, we really look to not be the one and all for our members. We really look to help the member where they're at that particular point, but then also really connect them to community services that are going to help support them on a more long-term basis.
Thank you for that. We just had a comment how it's very important clients have a good experience, and I'm hoping that you have seen most people that get those case management services have that experience. I want to go to the next question, unless I missed over anything. I hope I didn't skip over anyone, just looking here. Nope. So what I wanted to touch was the mental health part of this, and one of the statistics, and I don't know if you guys can go back to that slide, but it's okay, I wrote it down. 38% are living in poverty that are Black and of this community. Can we throw out some sort of ideas as to why? Are they not being respected in the home, so they run away? Then once they leave, they don't find the resources that they need, so they end up on the street. What ways or what things have you seen or come across in your areas as to what is causing, I think this is, well, there's 53, yeah, to this big disparity for Black people?
Well, I mean, there's so many levels to it. Like, first we have to look at why so many Black people are living in poverty. And then we have to look at the cultural aspect of it. Our community is very largely faith-based, and more often than not, faith-based communities are homophobic, transphobic. You combine that, and this is why a lot of our trans clients are homeless. But it's not all doom, gloom, and despair, because like I really want to uplift this community. When I first started working, I had a trans woman come into my office, and not only was she Black and trans, she was also intellectually disabled and homeless, but she had Medicaid, and she was able to have hormone replacement therapy, and eventually through Medicaid, it covered her bottom surgery. So,
Can you be clear on what that is? I'm sorry for those of us that don't know.
Okay, so bottom surgery is what is commonly known to people as gender reassignment surgery or sexual reassignment surgery. Some people like to word it more positively and have gender affirming surgery. I like to use that because some people feel that this affirms their gender. It's really up to the person using it. So again, she was a Black trans woman, so she had triple whammy. And she was homeless, but she had Medicaid, and she was able to have hormone replacement therapy and bottom surgery.
Does this create some sort of relief for them? I mean, to get this surgery and still have all of those other things to be worried about, does this kind of help uplift their well-being to, helping their own situation?
Oh, of course, because could you imagine being homeless and not being able to live as how you are or how you wish to present.
It's like that one thing you kind of just want in your life to work out, right?
Yeah. And, with the homeless population, appearance is everything. Absolutely everything. It can make or break a dollar for you based on how you look. And, having access to whatever services that are affirming for them can really help them gain the confidence to get jobs, housing, all those things. Because a lot of, trans folks are, reluctant or hesitant to get jobs because there's the strong likelihood of being discriminated in the workplace or just not even being hired, period, because of who they are. So you throw homelessness on top of it, it's incredibly disparaging.
I will say job applications I've seen as of late do have the questionnaire of this added. Do you associate as binary or non-binary? Or it's very extensive at this point. So it seems as though they're trying to make a point to be inclusive of everyone, it seems. So, which is great. This is good news. I am out of questions, but I would love to entertain anything that anybody may have that you can throw into the chat. Or are there any last remarks for anyone from the team that presented, or even Asia or Arthur, if you guys have anything that you would like to add to this, please do, to the conversation. Trying to make sure I went through all my notes of questions here. I did want to go through the poll. I have that here. So we took a poll and we asked, how familiar are you? And it seemed like everybody was average, which could be a good thing. That's not, to me, it's not bad. I don't know. So that's great. Hopefully
not mad at 50%.
You can leave and have learned more. I'm sorry.
So not mad at 50%. Half
Yeah.
of us knew stuff and half of us didn't, and it's all
yeah. So that's pretty good. Yeah. So I just want to open the floor even to the panelists. If there's something you want to further discuss, that would be great. Oh, as far, actually, since I don't see any questions, when people do come for any sort of counseling, how is that taken in that community? Are they, do they want to do it? Do they deem it as important that they need it, or they're just there because they have to? Like, how is that seen?
I think
I worded that okay.
I think I know what you're saying, and I can speak on it just a little bit. I think there's definitely instances where people come to the counseling program because they have specific goals for their transition in mind, specific medicine or that they want to access, and they know that they can't do that without a letter from us.
That was going to be another question. So they have to go through a certain amount of counseling in order to go to the next step or continue on with their journey.
So it really depends. I hate to keep saying that to you, but so some insurances for HRT, for example, will mandate that a person has lived for over a year as their preferred gender. Some will require the mental health professional that's writing you the letter to have been working with them for a year. Some won't. So it kind of really depends on what your insurance is asking from you, and then what your provider wants from you as well, like the medical provider. And I think that can't really speak for Golden or Tommy, but I'm sure Golden would agree with me that we want to make this process as easy as possible for our TG&C clients. So if they come and they sign up for counseling just to get that letter, we're going to do what we need to do to help get them that letter, because like I had mentioned, we are gatekeepers and we don't want to be. We want to make this as easy as possible, as smooth as possible, because gender affirming medicine saves lives, and kind of like full stop. So it's okay if they're coming because they want someone to talk to and need a space to share. And it's okay if they're coming to get a letter.
Thank you for that. Cristobal, do you know, for our case management specifically, have you seen they have to go through any sort of counseling, as anything unique that you know of, or it's pretty much the same across the scale?
So I would say, I don't, so I partner with our care management teams and our clinical teams, but I don't necessarily case manage anybody anymore. I've never really had a trans case that I kind of needed to, help support the member to gain benefits. I do know that we cover, hormone treatment and we cover surgery, but the process to to get those services. I'm not, you know, a subject matter expert on it, but I did want to just briefly speak. I know we don't have any questions at the moment, but I wanted to share, you know, it's really important if you're on the call, if you're listening to this later, if you identify, whether it's you identify as T, GNC, or LGBTQ plus, and you are trying to access services, it's really important to, you know, open up that dialogue, whether it's with the doctor that you're seeing now, or maybe you aren't connected to a doctor because you're not comfortable with your old doctor or don't know where to go. You know, your insurance company, I can't speak for all of them, and we are a huge organization, so we're definitely doing work to continue to make improvements. But, you know, there is somebody always within an organization that understands your needs. So don't be discouraged from, you know, from asking for the services or for asking for support. And if you don't get it with the first person you speak to, continue to ask, because in New York, each health insurance company needs to have a care management program. You know, so there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things that the Department of Health is looking for. You know, they're looking to make sure that we're increasing awareness on PrEP, that we're providing HIV services, that we're looking and identifying, do we have trans members within our plan, and are we providing them with care management? So these are all things that the state is looking at, and we are, you know, responsible for doing that work. But it also takes often, I'll speak for myself. I'm, you know, I don't know the trans experience, but even as a gay man, I know that I often have to advocate for myself, and I'm not comfortable all the time with a male provider. So I will request a female provider because that's who I feel more comfortable speaking to and sharing. You know, I don't wait for my doctor to ask me certain questions. You know, obviously I did say I'm a health educator, but I ask the questions, I request the tests that I want to be done. So it's, you know, really important that, you know, you not get discouraged in the complexity of the system, and you try to, you know, be an advocate for yourself, or to go to places like Pride Center that can help you become that advocate.
That's a really great point. There are times in life where you just have to stand up and, you know, ask for things that people won't give you. So it's, you know, that's a really good takeaway. If you take anything away from this event today.
I can just speak about Empire BlueCross BlueShield in terms of writing letters and stuff like that, in terms of like a timeline. First, like, I've never encountered a problem with a client and writing for a client. Like, I've written a letter for hormones after seeing a client for a month.
Me now?
That yeah, I could hear you. You were frozen for a second.
Okay.
I've written a letter for a client that I've seen for a month that has a Empire, and there was no issue, and they were serviced at Mount Sinai. Again, another client with Mount Sinai, I was seeing the client for like 3 months, and I wrote a letter for hormones, and there was no issue. So as far as the timeline with Empire, seeing a client and access to services, I do not think there is a issue or roadblock that I know of. So kudos to y'all on that regard.
Thank you for that. Well, as you said, it's our job to ensure we are helping our members, or if anybody doesn't have health insurance, I'll throw this pitch. If we want to go to the wrap-up slides, please let us know. You can send an email to the emails that you may have seen on the screen, or you can go to empireblue.com/NY. And if you want to know more about Pride, you could screenshot, oh, sorry, okay. So here we are here. If you need anything, we do have a location that is by appointment only.
Brandy, just so people can follow your advice to screenshots.
Okay, yeah, so if you guys want to screenshot and you want to find out more about Pride Center in Staten Island, you can do that now. They have counseling services, they have specialists, and they also do outreach, and they are available to you guys and have been very helpful, as you can see. Thank you guys for jumping on this event with me. I really appreciate it. And then again, if you want to find us, we are open. We have more than just this one location. Please go online to try to find out if there's one by you. You can go to empireblue.com/NY. We also would like for you to just call before you come in the case you have to make an appointment, just to stay safe. We would appreciate that. And then there is myself and Cristobal. If you want to reach out to us, please feel free to screenshot this as well. We provide a lot of health workshops. We still do go out in the field. If you guys are having some sort of giveaway, we can provide small giveaways, information on our services, and just help you build some awareness in your neighborhood. So please feel free to reach out in the case you want to work with us.